The wind howled over the lonely shores of Otto Island, where the waves crashed endlessly against jagged rocks and forgotten sand. It was here, on this remote corner of Alaska, that fisherman Joel Barnes stumbled upon something that would soon make headlines around the world. He had been walking along the coast that morning, scanning for driftwood and washed-up debris after a powerful storm the night before. But amid the scattered seaweed and broken shells, something glinted faintly under the gray light. At first, he thought it was a piece of scrap metal, maybe from a shipwreck carried in by the tide. But as he brushed away the gravel and sand, his hands froze. Beneath his fingertips was a massive rusted chain, its iron links thick as his arm and half buried in the earth. Each segment was corroded by decades of salt and time, yet still solid enough to resist his pull. The chain didn't end there, it stretched deep into the ocean, vanishing beneath the restless waves. Joel stood silently, staring at the chain's endless path into the water. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. He followed its trail for several yards until the tide forced him to stop. Something about it felt wrong, unnatural, almost alive, like the sea itself was guarding a secret. Out of instinct, he snapped a few photos with his phone and sent them to the Coast Guard station on a deck. Within hours, a reply came back, "Stay clear of the site. We're sending a team." By the time the Coast Guard arrived 2 days later, word had spread among nearby fishing communities. Everyone wanted to know what Joel had found. Standing beside the waves, the fisherman pointed toward the glimmering chain disappearing beneath the waterline. "It's been here for decades," he said quietly. "But I think the storm finally unearthed it." A diving recovery crew suited up and entered the freezing waters. From the shore, Joel and the authorities watched as bubbles rose to the surface. Minutes passed, then an hour. The divers reported back through the radio, "Following the chain, going deeper, doesn't look natural. Repeat, it's bolted into something." The tension grew heavier with each transmission. The current was strong, visibility poor, and the further they went, the more the ocean seemed to resist their descent. "It's massive," one diver finally said through heavy static. "This thing hasn't moved in years. It's like the sea welded it in place." Then silence. The next sound to come through the radio was a deep, labored breath. "We found it," the diver whispered. "You need to see this." Nearly 80 feet below the surface, the team's floodlights revealed the shape of a gigantic anchor, still bolted to the seabed. The chain Joel found was no ordinary debris, it was tethered to the remains of a sunken warship, its hull torn open but strangely preserved by the cold waters of the Bering Sea. The divers explored carefully, their light sweeping across the corroded metal. But when they peered through the shattered hull, their calm professionalism vanished. "Oh God," one of them muttered. Inside the wreck, stacked neatly against the interior walls, were dozens of intact artillery shells, corroded sea mines, and grenades, many still active after all these years. The team froze. One wrong movement could turn the entire site into an underwater inferno. The command ship above went silent as the divers' voices crackled over the radio. What they described didn't sound real. For decades, Otto Island had been considered one of the most desolate corners of the Aleutian chain, untouched by civilization, forgotten by time. But now, beneath its icy waters, they had found a sleeping monster from the past. The dive leader's tone was calm but clipped. "We're aborting the mission. Repeat possible live ordnance on board. Marking the coordinates." The surface crew exchanged uneasy glances. A single spark down there could detonate thousands of pounds of forgotten explosive. The recovery operation had just turned into a race against disaster. Within hours, a military exclusion zone was declared around the island. Navy explosive disposal units were flown in from Anchorage, along with a team of marine historians. The press caught wind of it, dubbing it the Ghost Chain of Otto. But for the few who had seen it up close, there was nothing romantic about it. It was a tomb. When the Navy divers returned, they approached the wreck with reverent caution. The ship's nameplate was half buried in silt, but after careful brushing, the engraved letters emerged through the grime. USS Valor. The historians exchanged looks. The Valor had vanished without a trace in 1943 during World War II, lost in heavy fog after a fierce skirmish with a Japanese destroyer. No distress call had ever been received. For over 80 years, families had waited for answers that never came until now. Inside the wreck, the divers found more than weapons. They found bunks, helmets, letters sealed in wax, and a rusted locket still clinging to a photo of a young woman smiling beside a man in uniform. The silence underwater was heavy. Every object they uncovered told a story of men who had never made it home. As the recovery operation continued, the Navy confirmed the unthinkable. Several torpedo warheads were still intact, their fuses unstable but unexploded. Any disturbance could trigger a chain reaction. Engineers worked for days in shifts, using robotic arms to carefully remove each device and secure it in blast-resistant container. When the last of the live ordnance was lifted to the surface, the team collectively exhaled. One mistake, and the entire crew could have been vaporized. Meanwhile, Joel Barnes watched from the shoreline, his hands trembling around a thermos of coffee. The Coast Guard officer approached him quietly. "You did the right thing calling us, son. You might have just prevented a catastrophe." But Joel barely nodded. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, where the waves still rolled in endlessly, hiding their secrets. The discovery had changed him. He no longer saw the ocean as a friend, but as a keeper of history, beautiful and merciless. Days later, a Navy transport ship carried away the final remnants of the USS Valor. The crew would be laid to rest with full military honors, their names finally added to the memorial wall at Pearl Harbor. When reporters asked Joel how he felt about the discovery, he simply said, It's strange, finding something the world forgot. The sea never forgets it, just waits. And as the chain that started it all was lifted from the beach, Joel took one last look at the rusted links before turning away. The sound of the waves echoed behind him, soft, steady, and endless, like the heartbeat of the ocean itself.